Hello everyone, and welcome to my Tales of Arise Retrospective. This is the one for the entire game, as that's why you're going to see all of the characters instead of just whatever character is in that current chapter. I'm going to try not to go on for too terribly long, but I mean, it's me, so I probably won't end up doing that very effectively. So, Tales of Arise is definitely a game, and I definitely finished playing it. I did enjoy it. I think it is good, but there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of places where they have the opportunity for greatness, and they just kind of let that get away from them. But let me start on the things I really liked about the game. Some of the deeper meanings and the things that stood out to me. First of all, one of the things that really kind of struck me was that the first part of the game, frankly, all the way through Linnaeus, I thought was amazing, and then everything after Linnaeus just had issues. One of the things I liked the most about the game is that you end up with, different ideologies around slavery. Because, Caligula was the stereotypical slavery. You know, you just end up, you're in a mine, there's people with whips, attacking people. People are dying because they're being overworked. I mean, it's just watch any movie about slavery, and that's probably the sort of, build-up that you get. The didnt are considered to be property and just trying to get something done. Cislodia is like the 1984 version of slavery, with information itself being weaponized and people being encouraged, they don't get quite enough food, so people are encouraged to find reasons to report on one another. That way, it's almost like the paranoid version of slavery, where not only do you want to control everyone, but you want to make it impossible for a rebellion to happen, because you incentivize people to report on one another so much that no one can ever rise up against you. I think Cislodia is probably my favorite of the regions, a favorite of the areas we went across. Elda Manasia is the... I don't know if this is intended, but I definitely got the impression that Elda Manasia was the capitalism version of slavery, where the people are more free than they are in any other system, but they're still not free to do whatever they want. They still have to use their life in order to earn the right to, grasp at happiness straws. It definitely still made a point that the Manasians were still slaves, and they're like, well, I mean, yeah, we're technically slaves, but it's not that bad. And at the end of it, you definitely still had Dohalim trying to take the step back and being like, oh, yeah, I'm stepping down as Lord, this is, oh? And they still had to restructure it and actually make the Renans and Danans equal. It wasn't actually equality, it was just the appearance of equality. And I actually really liked that as a setup, where it was this is the good one, but it's still bad. I thought that was very powerful, very well put together. Mahag Sar, I honestly do not have any clue in the world what Mahag Sar was trying to be. You got there and it was the Darkwings had just blown up the palace, and then you ended up with what is her name? Almadria was in hiding from them, except she wasn't really hiding, she was in the palace and they were trying to get to her, so they had busy work for us. But you never got a real sense of how it was before, other than the Darkwings didn't like it. I honestly don't really know what Mahag Sar was trying to, push for. It was, and I'll talk about this again in a second, but it was everyone deserves to be able to have a decent life, even if we don't like them. Because it really felt like that I was supposed to care that Amledric, turned all of the all of the Darkwings into the Hallowing, and I just didn't. So Mahag Sar just was kind of a big miss for me. I didn't really care about whatever I was supposed to care about. Kenneth Harros was slavery in the guise of religion. All of the people there, both Renans and Danans alike, were just taught to revere Volron as a god figure. And so they couldn't even think for themselves. Like, they had given up the capacity to be a human, it felt like. Because I'm a very, very, very strong believer in the idea that if you take away a man's ability to reason and think for himself, he largely stops being man. Like, I feel like that's a defining trait, is the fact that we're really smart people. Like, we are the smartest animal, without question. Dolphins, come at me. And then Linegus, I don't know that Linegus technically qualifies as a type of slavery, but it was almost like slavery of nationalism, because people were just so obsessed with the idea of being Rinnin, and being Rinnin made them better than other people, that they never really seemed to put together the fact that they had no freedom. They just had to stand around and wait for one dude to tell them what to do. And other than that, they just, I mean, like, there was one person that devoted her life to writing some epic poem about Dohalim. Like, it was like, it didn't really feel like a great way to live. They were better off than forced labor, but they weren't getting to reap any of the fruits of what they had achieved, because they were just so devoted to, well, we're in the better camp, and therefore we had no right to complain. Our way is the best. So I thought that was my going to the different areas and seeing the different ways that slavery was kind of explored. Really had me excited. Like, it was amazing. I also want to talk a little bit about, because sacrifice was also handled very directly. You know, you had, like, as you went further and further into the game, the sacrifice became less and less prominent, less and less relevant. You started off with Zephyr, and Zephyr's sacrifice was the inspirational sacrifice, the sacrifice that reached out and touched the hearts and minds of everyone around him, and it was extremely powerful. I really enjoyed the way that was handled and the way that was approached. I thought Zephyr was, like, really, he's the 7th party member. Like, we got to play with him a little bit, but just in general, like, he really had a lasting effect on the entire story. Miguel, or Miguel, I think it was Miguel. It really felt like he was the almost a self-serving sacrifice. I wrote down here like a conflagration type sacrifice, someone that, like, shines a light on a problem, but it's a very almost cowardly sacrifice, because you get other people's attention and you get to die saying, I've done everything I can, but there was no real reason for it. I kind of equated to, like, the people that would kneel down and then set themselves on fire, and everyone will pay attention to them, but it was just like, that's such a weird way to try and deal with what is happening in the world and what you want to happen in the world, because there's no, you get to say that you've done everything that you know how to, and that might even be true. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, but you're not there in order to work towards a solution. You're just basically giving up your essence in order to say, this is a problem, do something. Because it really felt like Miguel had every opportunity. Like, Dohalim was willing to listen to him, and he was just like, I know I've talked about it before, just that whole scene was just really badly written and not well done, but it is certainly a type of sacrifice, and I do think to a certain extent, a lot of, it felt like there was a sacrifice with every area. There wasn't really a sacrifice when it came to, Caligula, but Zephyr died in Ciclodia, Eliminacia had Miguel dying, Mahag Sar had the Darkwings, like, get blown up by Almadria. And that one, again, like I said before, Mahag Sar just confuses me, because I didn't care that the Darkwings died. And I think maybe that was the point, that it was an idea that just because you are killed doesn't mean that you deserve to be mourned. Like, that people should be judged based on their actions, not just some, like, weird idea that every life is precious. Except they didn't really do anything with that, so I'm just kind of, like, not sure what the Darkwings were really meant to do, or what their call to action was, what action was supposed to take as a reaction to the fact that this happened. And yeah, at the end of the day, I just don't know. I'm not sure what Maharag Sar was trying to get me to do. And then Geneth Harrows was even like almost worse, because in that case, the sacrifices on the boats just went and got converted into essence without us even seeing them. And like Alvin was really like bothered by that, but it was this very like almost ethereal and esoteric sacrifice. So it just felt like every area human life was less and less relevant. We paid less attention to it, and it had less ability to have an effect. To the point where by the end of the game, death just was like a currency. Looking at the party members, Alvin, I have issues with Alvin. In terms of like Tales' protagonist, he had a good story, but both he and Xion had the same problem, that their story was too backloaded. Like, he didn't feel real until partway through Geneth Harrows, whenever he got his ability to like feel pain back, and then all of the developments with him happened after Linagus. Like we on Linagus we found out he was a sovereign, but it was a very weird thing put together. I thought his story was interesting, but I felt for too long he was a nothing character, and it was weird having him be the main character because I knew nothing about him and I cared nothing about him. I will say very, very early on I was proud, because I said, it's like, oh, I bet Alvin will end up being Renan because we can't see his eyes, and the only way to tell Renans is that their eyes glow when they use powers. And then I was actually right about that, because whenever he uses his over limit, his left eye glows. And it was weird it was only the left eye. I think that's because he was one of the very early Renans, one of the very early augments. But it definitely does still do that, so I'm going to count myself as half right. Xion, basically almost the exact same as Alvin. I actually think Xion's story is better than Alvin's, because the whole idea of carrying this curse through your bloodline and trying to sacrifice yourself so that you can save the world, and not expecting to go close to anyone because you were planning on dying. Like, she has a very interesting story. I just wish we had more clues about it or more understanding, because again, I didn't give a flying crap about Xion for the majority of the game. And that's the thing, like, this entire time I've been talking about how the fact that my favorite part of the game was up until Linagus. Like, Linagus was the last good part of the game, and Xion only got good right before Linagus. So, like, for 80% of the portion of the game that I enjoyed, I didn't like Xion. And even though I think she redeemed herself in a really, really real way, even though I really just end up appreciating her a whole lot, we still just end up in a situation where she's got a lot of ground to make up because of how much I didn't care about her, like, leading into the everything. Also, I just have to ask, how the hell is Xion, the descendant of Naomi, or Naori? Because here's the thing. Naori's curse that, like, is being passed down person to person is this whole thing about the thorns showing up. And, like, living in them, and the thorns are the reason that, like, no one can touch Xion. So how does this, like, line of people keep having kids? Okay, I get it. I know you think that we're all, like, JRPG players, and therefore we never get any. But being able to be touched is pretty damn important to getting knocked up. I have to tell you. I don't know if you know that or not, game designers. No one is getting pregnant if, like, they get put into agonizing pain the second anyone puts a hand on them. Or the other person gets agonizing pain. Law? I actually thought Law was the most, like, the best story in here. And granted, maybe that's a little bit me. Maybe it resonates with me, and that's why I like it so much. But Law's story boils down to the idea of wanting to reconnect with a father he had previously rejected, and coming to learn just how wise his father actually was, right as his father passes on from this world. And the overwhelming amount of regret and the kind of aggression from all the time that you wasted. You know, that's such a powerful, like, story to tell, and you'd have such a hard time moving on and trying to make sense of the world now that you know that, you know, your father is no longer around, and you missed the chance to get to know him, even though you now thoroughly respect him. And like, that is a very, very good thread that goes across. Law's kind of a derp do everything, but he ends up having some of the wisest nuggets in the game, and I just really, really, really felt for him. I really liked his story the whole way through. He's probably my favorite character. No, he is my favorite character, though I will say Rinwell is a very, very close second. Like Law, she ends up having a, like, a chip on her shoulder and just really, really, really dislikes herself and blames herself. Though she blames herself for her parents dying when she was very, very young, and has to get over that. And frankly, that is less a... I can't get mentally into that story as much, because I never had an experience like that, and it doesn't make sense to me that you could have that as something that you've been living with for so long, and you still are blaming yourself rather than this woman that you have sworn vengeance against. Like, I get how that would be a fear that gnaws at you, but... like, it would just sort of come out of nowhere where, like, this is something that was eating at her, and it only showed up a few times, so a Law's story was better. One of the things I do regret about Rinwell is that we found out that the only real difference between Daemons and Rinnans is that Rinnans were experimented on by the Great Spirit in order to make sure they could use magic. They, like, almost got selectively bred in order to bring out their magical ability. So, to a certain extent, Rinwell is basically a Rinnan. Like, obviously she wasn't born on Rinna, she wasn't experimented on by the Great Spirit, but she was a very, very, very strong magic user. When the worlds were put back together, I bet Rinwell would be near Lord power. And the fact that Rinwell was so racist against the Rinnans for so long, when she herself was basically a Rinnan, I really wish they had kind of dove into that possibility, had that conversation. I think that would have been extremely powerful, extremely cool. For Dohalim was a really subtle character, but I did enjoy him. Because the whole time we got to know Dohalim, the whole time we interacted with Dohalim, we really, like, you could tell that he was a little bit standoffish, a little bit, like, I don't want to say he thought he was better than everyone, but his wall was up. He wasn't really opening himself up to the people around him. And you eventually got to find out that that was because he had ended up having to kill his best friend. And so he just wasn't willing to allow himself to make friends with anyone else. And I thought that was a revelation that fit his character very well. It made a lot of things about Dohalim just click, without Dohalim being boring or, like, seeming like an incomplete character before that revelation. You know, like, Alfred and Shion didn't really feel like real characters, and then you got to know their backstories, and you're like, huh, that's interesting. But Dohalim felt very real, felt very well put together, and then learning about his history just made him make more sense, if that makes sense. I really liked him. And then there's Kisara. And I'll be honest, and I hate to say this sounds mean, I don't have a clue why Kisara was in the game. Like, she's like, oh, I'm going to carry on Miguel's legacy and go with you guys, and then that was it? Like, I don't know what her story was. I don't know what I was supposed to think about her. I don't know if she achieved her dreams. Like, she just honestly felt out of place, you know, trying to look back at everyone. So yeah, like, Law, Rinwell, and Dohalim, I really enjoyed. Alfred and Shion I enjoyed by the end of the game, but didn't enjoy for a long time. And Kisara, I'm pretty sure Kisara was the character that was in my party the least, and that's because I just had no connection to her whatsoever. So, that brings us to the main plot. Again, I really liked going through the different lands, seeing the different approaches to how to rule people, and sort of dismantling them. I really like, I definitely, obviously, I know Tales of Arise taking a very, very bold stance of being anti-slavery. How brave of them. But I do have to say, like, at the end of the end of the game just felt rushed and weird and not good. What? Why did Volron show up at the end? Like, it felt like they didn't like the Great Spirit as the final boss, and they just kind of were like, okay, and now Volron's here, and that was the entirety of what happened. And I don't understand why they brought Volron in. Like, if all they really had to do in order to make Volron make sense is not have Volron be at the center of Linnaeus. You get there and you fight the Red Women because they're guarding the book seed thing. I forget his name because I'm terrible. But they're fighting. They're guarding that thing, and like there's 4 of the Red Women, and one of them like hightails it out of there, while the other 3 fight off the party. And then they have to get out of there because the room's blowing up, and you just never see Volron. And then you get to the center of Rinna, and Volron is there, and he's strapped to a thing, and they're using him as a conduit, and he's actually what is grounding the flower ceremony. And then you like fight off the Great Spirit, and as the Great Spirit starts to dissipate, and they end up absorbing it, that lets Volron out, and then Volron is just like, "Argh!" And like that would have made sense, but the whole like crashing in on a ship and being like, "I will stop," like he was a caricature. He was a joke. Like, he killed me more than the Great Spirit did, but I just can't take him seriously. It was dumb as dumb can be. Alvin, and again at the end, whenever he let Volron do whatever the hell But by the way, actually, I'm sorry. What happened to the little like Dohalim second that disappeared and ran into Maragsar in order to like take the seeds of Helgen? What the hell happened to that plotline? We never saw him after he left the palace. We suspected he went to Maragsar, never found him there. I'm assuming he was just in the palace and got blown up by the Darkwings, but I don't know that. But yeah, at the end, whenever Volron like grabbed the thing made of the 6 essences, and then it exploded, and Volron, I guess, died. I still don't know what happened to Volron at the end, but the fact that Alvin just was like had him on the brink and wouldn't finish him, and also wouldn't pick up the damn thing they came for, so Volron could do that, then it completely took me out of the moment. Like, that's the thing they've been looking for like the last third of the story. That's the thing he needs to save Shion. Shion is like only has seconds left to control this thing, and he's gonna have this little talk with, I forgive you, Volron. Alvin, get out of here. That is not the way that this should be handled at all. Very much got taken out of the moment by that end scene, and I think that's like the end of the day, is that the good ending lost all effect because it broke my immersion. It shattered my suspension of disbelief. Alvin just was not acting the way a human would, and then the plot just sort of like ran in and bailed him out and was like, it's okay, you can still have your good ending even though you royally fucked this up. And yeah, I'm not here for that. I want the ending to make sense. I want the ending to feel like a real thing. But I will say, I know I've been very, very negativistic on the main plot. I did love the emphasis they had for those like 5 episodes or so. They were just trying to figure out how to bring the slaves of Ganeth Haros back to themselves and teach them to live again. And they really kind of tried to tackle the difficulties in re-entering the societies. Like, that would have been awesome. I would have really enjoyed if they just got rid of the whole Rinna section. And like after we did that, then there was this whole like we found out what was happening at Linnaeus, and Linnaeus was dying, and we like had to deal with some of the stronger people in charge of the Rinnans and reintegrate Rinnans into the society of Dana, because they would want to still rule, and we would have to like enter some sort of contest, our own version of the crown contest, because we would actually have won the crown. We would have all 5 master cores. We'd be like, well, these are our terms. They say no, there'd be a fight with the boss, and then we could totally different ending of the game. But I would have really liked that. Have a realistic ending to what happened. And the last thing I want to say, and these are getting I'm sorry, I don't mean to end on negatives, but the combat system felt really, really, really good with groups of enemies. Like the whole thing of being able to get them about halfway down and then build up their meter and do the instant kill and kind of go from enemy to enemy, and other enemies near the one I was killing took a bunch of damage, so you just got to kind of mow through them and you're just like, yeah? That felt amazing. But bosses got super tedious. Bosses you couldn't... It really felt like the only stun I had was when my, Flame Strike with the up key, or the up D-pad, came offline. Other than that, you couldn't stagger bosses. So you just had to chip away with them, chip away at them, chip away at them. And then, like, twice in the fight you get to use a big attack, but it just... Big attack didn't mean anything at that point. It wasn't anything you were doing, it was just a set intervals. And then, I know I complained about this in a lot of sections. I know I complained about this several times. But the executive board over Tales of Arise really, really, really wanted me to buy the gold thing, the gold DLC thing. And I didn't want to. And it's bullshit. They sell me a full-price game and then handicap the gold system in order to try and force me into paying more money afterwards. That really got tedious. That really got old. And it really soured my opinion of the game. So, at the end of it, do I recommend this game? Yes. But if I have someone who has not played a Tales game ever, it's like the 5th or 6th Tales game I'll recommend. I'm definitely recommending Vesperia, Symphonia, Abyss, Xillia, and Berseria before it. And maybe some other ones too, like, I think Graces is probably higher than it too. As long as the future arc exists. Graces is really bad without the future arc. I mean, yeah, it's better than, Zestiria, for sure. It's better than Fantasia. Fantasia's really good for its time, but I wouldn't recommend it now. It's better... I'll recommend it before I recommend a sequel. But, like... Yeah, there's a lot of issues with this game. It's good, but it's got a lot of problems. Definitely areas to learn from. But I will see you all next time. Thank you very much for tuning in. On Thursday, we find out what we're playing next. Look forward to it.